To get across the headlines, I'm joined now by the Australian's national editor, Dennis Shanahan. Dennis, just quickly, we'll get into some other stuff, but this housing bill, it's really now a fight between the left of politics in this country, Labor and the Greens. The bill, of course, was rejected in the Senate by the Greens and the Coalition. The PM says, very hairy-chested last week, he's going to introduce it or reintroduce it and potentially create it as a double dissolution trigger. Now, a couple of things here. First, if you look at the numbers and you work out the funding allocated, we're talking about 30,000 homes. What they're putting on the table is $83,000 per property. Now, if you show me a house you can build in Australia for 83 grand, I don't believe it. Data says that a home in Australia on average is 300,000 to build, so I don't think that works. But secondly, and you point this out in The Australian today, he's already trying to walk back this threat of an early election. Have a listen.
Well, I'd rather not have it. I'd rather have this policy passed. But of course, a double dissolution trigger, what that does is doesn't necessarily provide for an early election.
Dennis, all a bit untidy, I reckon.
Yes, it is a bit untidy. And look, Anthony Albanese has two problems. First one is the policy issue. Clearly the Coalition is not going to support the $10 billion Housing Assistance Fund, and the Greens want more money and a national rent freeze for them to support it. So these are fairly solid opposition from the Coalition and the Greens, and the Prime Minister is trying to bring it forward. Now, the policy has always been a difficulty in naming 30,000 homes. Everyone in the industry, in the building industry, actually supports the idea because they think that there needs to be more supply of housing because there is a shortage of housing. I think that's generally accepted. But the fact that whether they can actually be delivered is another issue completely, and that's a policy issue. But the real political issue that Anthony Albanese's got himself into here is he's used the double dissolution threat, that is a full Senate election with a House of Representatives election, which would, he thinks, make it more difficult for the Greens to get up as many members as it did in a half Senate. But the problem is people have immediately said, well, if you're using this as a threat, then you mean that it will be an early election. Last week he had to say, oh, I don't mean there won't be an election this year. Of course, he's got the referendum on the Voice in October probably. So he can't have an election and a referendum at the same time. So then he has to try now to say, oh, well, look, we can put off a double dissolution until 2025, which is true, but which also means, well, what's the urgency? Why are you saying that you're going to call a double dissolution election if you can't get this housing bill through, but then wait 2 years until after the next election when the government is returned and have a joint sitting of Parliament? It is very mixed messaging. He's trying to threaten the Greens and it's just not working. The Greens aren't copping it, and I think that there is a very little gain in a full Senate election for Labor compared to the cost involved, the political cost involved in what is a very messy situation right now.